State University, and they're going to be presenting on reimagining the repository as a community nexus, who is connecting with community-based research. It is all yours.
Thank you. Whoops. I am sharing this without being able to see what you're seeing. So I'm assuming you can see the first slide. All right. So just wanted to give a brief overview before we get started, looking at the missions of the CSU library that Jackie is going to talk about from her perspective, and as from the Columbus Community Geography Center, which is an organization that I oversee at Columbus State University, which is sort of community outreach and in community engaged scholarship. So our questions that we have together in relation to the ePress that we're going to talk about is we really wanted to interrogate the data to find out who our community of viewers is using through the ePress and how we might better connect with that community, and talk a little bit about the tools and methods we've used to try and answer those questions, a little bit about the findings, and then some brief conclusions. And we have a little map there as a geographer, so you can see where Columbus is in the state of Georgia.
Okay, I'll start off with the mission of the CSU Press. And the CSU Press is the institution repository of Columbus State University. And we were established in 2010, and we first used the DSpace platform. However, in 2015, we migrated to Digital Commons. And probably like most of your institution repositories, the mission of the CSU Press is to provide access to the scholarly work of CSU faculty and students. But the more important aspect of the CSU Press that I find is that it truly highlights the scholarship of Columbus State University worldwide, which that access, I think, was not possible until we started the institution repository project. We went through several phases of the CSU Press. The CSU Press was created in 2010 to be a faculty bibliography of works. The provost at the time asked the library to create one, and we decided to go one step further and actually use the institutional repository framework to host this bibliography. And we first populated the bibliography using faculty vita that the provost kept on asking faculty members to give us. And during that time, we also worked really hard in providing not only the citations of the resources, but also we worked to being able to upload faculty works as well. Later on, and actually currently, we've done a lot with the faculty bibliography using the Scopus tool of Digital Commons. We've used that quite a bit. And very recently, we decided to try to do an import from Digital Measures into the CSU Press. And Digital Measures is a platform that faculty use for promotion portfolios, and also for annual reports. After the bibliography we thought was becoming successful, we decided to publish all the university's theses and dissertations. In doing so, we created a huge digitization project, and we digitized everything that we had. Each year, we also have been digitizing annually the year's output of CSU students for the theses and dissertations. And in 2020, we decided to go born digital with the theses and dissertations. We are no longer digitizing. We are accepting the theses and dissertations in PDF format and making them accessible and then uploading them in the CSU Press. Lately, I've been trying to capture a broader sense of scholarship at CSU. I've incorporated a lot of student projects and student journals in the CSU Press. I've also have uploaded several video collections in the CSU Press, podcast. I've also been working on a project to archive social media posts from the university into the CSU Press. And this is where Amanda's Columbus Community Geography Center collection comes in, because as you will see, in some ways it's maybe outside the scope of a traditional institutional repository, in other ways not so much. And so it's kind of a way to expand the CSU Press from traditional works.
All right, so we thought it might be useful just to give you a sense of what the Community Geography Center is and what it's been doing for the last decade. We partnered with Jackie's ePress in about 2.5 years ago, but we've had over 20 publications of one form or another since we've been going over the last decade. So we're in the History and Geography department, and we're very much focused on collaborative scholarship. So working with community organizations, helping them meet their mission. They have particular questions or problems or issues that they need to resolve, and they partner with us, and we bring our expertise with tools and strategies, but our partners are really the community members and organizations. They are the knowledge producers or the holders of the knowledge, and we need to collaborate to help them meet their mission or solve their problem. So we look at a lot of different types of challenges, from economic development, food accessibility, neighborhood revitalization. We do a lot of Black history and Black tourism focus work. So you can see a few of our maps and our activities here on the screen. So we've completed over 20 projects with 30 plus partners in the community. So we're really, our scholarship is very much located within the community. So our questions, really, as I began to collaborate with Jackie and was occasionally looked at some of the data, especially in this last year, as I've had to sort of refocus our community engagement, because it's a lot harder to do that, especially in a classroom during COVID. It was a great time to sort of step back a little bit and think more broadly about not only who the community was that we were serving directly in our partnerships, whether it's a food bank or a local historical organization, but who might we be reaching with the publications that we produce at the end of that process. We co-author these publications with our partners, and it's part of our agreement. Unless there's very sensitive materials, we will publish something in the ePress to capture that project that we've done within the classroom context. So we were asking these questions about who our community of viewers are and how we might use that data that we can produce from the ePress to connect with more effectively with the viewers in our community.
We decided to use two tools in measuring community engagement of the CCGC collections. And we used the two tools that are built into the Digital Commons platform. We used the PlumX and the Digital Commons Metrics. Now, PlumX Metrics measures information about viewer online engagement. It looks at the amount of citations a resource has had online, usage in the forms of abstract views, downloads and plays, captures, people who bookmark the resources, mentions as in comments, reviews, and even Wikipedia posts, PlumX will tell you. And also it does a lot of social media. It shows tweets, Facebook likes, and shares, which we find useful in kind of seeing what viewers are doing with this information. Now, the Digital Commons dashboard actually tells information about the viewer in the forms of institutional affiliation and the location in which the viewer is located. With the Digital Commons dashboard, we found that the Digital Commons dashboard data is organized by institutional affiliation using IP addresses. So in this study, we define engagement as the number of downloads the collections have had. And in the study, we're also very interested in the types of affiliation that viewers have as well. And we have also been able, using the dashboard, to establish that global engagement includes actually viewers from across the world. And we also define local regional engagement as users within a 50-mile radius around the Columbus metropolitan area, which includes 2 states of Georgia and Alabama. We looked at data from Auburn, Alabama, LaGrange, Georgia, Americus, Georgia, and Eufaula, Alabama. Now, the PlumX data provided us with information about the level of social media engagement and also about abstract views and downloads from the CSU Press platform. And also, we used the full reports that are provided in PlumX because they clearly identify the tags used for each collection. And it does this, as you can see from the screenshot here, on a side-by-side view of the metadata and the metrics data. So it allows us to do more assessment of exactly how people are finding the resource and how they're using it.
All right, so we're looking at these collections, these 21 collections. 19 of them are downloadable, and that's what we're using as engagement. We recognize that's not the only measure of engagement, but that's the one we decided to go with for this small study. There are 2 links to Digital Humanities web publications as part of the collections. So those aren't downloadable. So basically they were sort of off the table, at least for this project. All right. So what did we find? We can't necessarily say these numbers are great or bad, or this is sort of just what we find. I'm sort of gratified, perhaps, that there is some interest. So for all our collections over the last 2.5 years since they've been published, we've had just over 2,000 downloads. And for us, thinking about community geography, which really does focus on the local region, the city, and sort of surrounding counties, these about a third or just under a third of all engagement is sort of that local definition. And what we found looking at the Digital Commons dashboard data is that there are like 5 definitions of the types of viewers that there are using the IP or ISP to assess that. So this isn't necessarily perfect, but it gives us a little bit more of an idea about who's engaging with the ePress at CSU. So obviously it's divided, as you can see here on the slide: education, commerce, government, military, and what we have called, the ePress doesn't call it this, but we call it non-institutional engagement. And what we've found, to look at the whole of all the local engagement, most of that, almost 80% of that, is not coming from an institution, sort of institutional alliance, right, between the viewer and their institution. So most people are not engaging with this material through institutions. Again, this is not perfect, but it gives us a bit more of a sense of who's looking. So you can see in that table below, non-institutional is by far the highest, then educational, and those actually are local educational institutions, CSU itself. So we have students and faculty using the information that we produce. And then, as you can see, commercial government, there's no engagement with military yet so far. All right, so let's have a look at the next slide. So to try and maybe better understand what we've done and what the engagement has been with the viewer, we looked at all 19 of the projects that have been published, and sort of started to identify the levels of engagement, local viewer engagement. So we're putting away the global engagement, just looking at who's viewing the materials locally, downloading in particular locally. And we can see 6 of our projects have got a high level of engagement, 3 medium level of engagement, and then 10 that have a low level of engagement. So that begins to offer me, as somebody who's interested and to support community engaged scholarship, we can see which projects really have had an impact and which projects maybe are lacking an audience for whatever reason, maybe because it's very, very specific, or maybe because we may not have tagged it in a way that's productive. But this begins to give us a sense of how we might start to analyze what's working, what types of projects are more appealing, and then maybe how we might position other projects to find the audiences that we think are potentially there in our local community.
With the Plumix metrics, we found that the CCGC collections have had 805 global abstract views. PlumX Metrics does not allow us to drill down to local users like the Digital Commons dashboard does. We also found that one collection received social media engagement in the form of 115 Facebook posts. However, this is the only collection that has. For the CSU libraries and the CSU Press, I was actually surprised to find that most of our local community engagement with the CCGC collections are actually non-institutional viewers. I had always thought that the collections in the CSU Press have been basically used by academic users. However, with this study, I found that may not necessarily be true. And which I find kind of interesting. It kind of broadens my idea of our audience and how we're reaching people. Not surprisingly, universities are the second greatest institutional type of viewer. Most of the users came from Columbus State University. However, we also had downloads from Auburn University in Alabama and Chattahoochee Valley Community College in Alabama as well. And the Plumix data, like I said, shows how people are using, and it indicates that people are finding the information and they're using that information as well, which as a repository manager, I'm very happy to see. But the study has also led to a couple questions that I have and that I'd like to do more research on. I wonder what other collections in the CSU Press actually have non-institutional users. Most of the resources in the CSU Press are scholarly in nature. However, are other types of users using those collections as well? Are people using the collections for personal research? We have a lot of scientific theses, and this theses, for example, are about, and most of the research is done by about the local community. Are they using that information for personal research? And we have a lot of historical documents. Are they using that for personal research? You know, I'd like to know a little bit more about our users of the other collections as well. And also I want to delve deeper into the PlumX metrics. That's, as you know, that's been around in the Digital Commons platform for a while, but I haven't really gotten into it as much as I'd like to, because I'd like to see how viewers are engaging with other resources in the CSU Press, and maybe even come up with a baseline that defines what exactly is a successful collection, if that's possible. And I like to kind of look at PlumX to consider the possibility of doing that, and also just to learn a lot more about how people are using the resources.
So for the Columbus Community Geography Center and our effort to engage the community and meeting their missions and their needs and answering their questions, I think one of the things that struck me about doing this research hand in hand with Jackie is that I had no idea that this data could be partly aligned with, at least in terms of Digital Commons dashboard, institutional and non-institutional viewership, which gave me a bit of a richer sense of who might be using the materials that we publish. I think I've come to the sort of tentative conclusion, and I'll be interested to hear other people's comments, that it may not be that important if folks are going through an institutional IP or their own ISP, maybe at home or on their phone. But it gives me a better sense of who or how I might think about community, not just individual users, but users that may have a commercial basis, an educational basis, a governmental basis. So that's, I think that's important when we publish whatever we're doing, is to think about the audience that we're engaging with. And I think it helps me to do that well, but also every time my classes meet and we complete a project and I'm getting them to write it up, I can tell them a lot more broadly and in much greater detail the type of audiences they could or might expect to have once they've published their materials. And I think that's really a powerful teaching tool, because I think we all know that getting students to think more broadly than writing for their professors, that's really important. And if they feel or they know that they have a public audience, they often take quite a lot more responsibility for their work. And to give them that rich sense of who might be looking I think is even more powerful in the classroom. And I think what this data has given us is that the table in the previous slide indicates is the level of engagement the particular project has had. So it's going to give me a really powerful tool to think critically about how we're positioning these projects in the ePress, how we're tagging them, and how we might better connect with our audiences with maybe more effective tagging, more tags. That might be one way that we can sort of unlock more viewers. I think PlumX for me, in terms of the CCGC, we can see the level of abstract engagement, which I think is sort of interesting. There's no local data provided by PlumX, so that doesn't necessarily help me better understand our local community. And it was sort of, I think it was very interesting to see that we had very little social media engagement, mostly because I think by the time I get the projects to Jackie for publication, it's long after the project is finished. So and we do often generate quite a lot of social media when we're asking people to come and meet us and share their stories and their images about a particular neighborhood or whatever the project is. By the time we get to publishing with Jackie, it could be 4 to 6 months after that initial effort. So it means that there may not be so much social media, but it's certainly making me think more about using social media when we're actually just published our work, sort of get a second wave of potential engagement. So that's just made me more aware of that, not as just as a tool, but as a strategy to engage community folks. So what new questions or actions has it sort of prompted for me? How do we connect with our better and more effectively with our local viewers? Can I use this information to really bring my low engagement projects up to medium or maybe even high engagement, reviewing those tags, and thinking about the potential of new audiences and the power of this strategy in the classroom to really empower students to think more carefully about the work they produce.
And since we use two tools that are provided in the Digital Commons platform, Amanda and I also thought that we would do some broader discussion and conclusions about those tools. What I think the Digital Commons dashboard does really well is really provides a lot of information about who our users are and where they're coming from. As we have already, Amanda and I have already talked about, we can't really find local information from PlumX, but we're able to drill down in the Digital Commons dashboard and specifically define who our local users are, which I think was a really good way of defining local engagement. Using both PlumX Metrics and the Digital Commons dashboard was also very useful because it provided a lot of information about not only who and where, but how. And I think it allowed us to see give us a broader picture of who these viewers are, who is engaging in these collections. And I think, like Amanda talked about in the last slide, I really think we can use that information to improve engagement or look at different ways of providing information about the collections. Some of the problems we had with the tools was that we started, as we were going on with our study, we started to wonder about how well does IP address tracking actually work. As you can see, we had the majority of our users were non-institutional users that did not come from an IP address affiliated with an institution. So it didn't give us any other information about that. Are these people researchers doing personal research at home? Are these people researchers affiliated with a university, however, of working from home? Are they students doing homework? Who are these people? And I'm not quite sure that the IP addresses, especially for non-institutional users, provide us with a clear picture of who these users actually are. However, it's the only way that we could to identify our users in the study. And also, both Amanda and I felt like the maps in the Digital Commons dashboard were difficult to understand and use at first. If you've used the dashboard, there's the map and there's little dots around it that have numbers in them. And but there's also right below the map a key that has the same colors of the dots on the map, but they provide different information. So we were kind of confused by what the key colors are showing us and what the colors on the map is showing us. And we were so confused that we actually had to ask our Digital Commons consultant for help. And once she explained it, the different colors on the maps shows the amount of downloads for each location and not the actual institutional type of the key. We were able to understand exactly what this data was showing us.
Yeah, so coming back to me, it's a little bit repetitive perhaps, but that gives us a sense of that local engagement. And I would urge and encourage anybody who runs an ePress in an institution that supports community engaged scholarship, that this may be an important tool, and the data may be important. Obviously, this is 10 years of publications. There's a lot going on there. So it's the Columbus Community Geography Center is quite mature. So we have a lot of stuff and a lot of data to look at, but it may be at least one tool to have a sense of that engagement with the folks around us. And I'm really, once like Jackie puts the tags in, 2.5 years ago, I don't necessarily get to see that side of things. So what I like about the PlumX data and having access to that is I can see the tags. And then, with this data, I can start to think about, oh, maybe I need to think up some more tags, or maybe I need to think about this in a slightly different way, to think of other academic and non-academic communities that might find this local data really, really powerful, useful, and important. Cool. All right. So with that, I will say we are open for questions, and this is our contact information if you guys are interested in that. And now I have to work out how to exit the full screen. All right.
Does anyone have any questions? Well, I guess that's all then. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you listening to our presentation and our study.
Thank you very much, Amanda and Jacqueline. That was an excellent presentation, and we appreciate you being part of this. If there